Hi, so I'm Steve Rayson from BuzzSumo, and I'll be taking you through this webinar today. I think we technically have a minute before we start, so we'll just let other people join the call before we kick off. So, as I say, I'll be aiming to take you through for about 30 minutes this morning, and if you've got any questions, do just type them into the questions box as we go. So I'll just give it another minute for others to join, and then we'll kick things off. But I hope it's sunny where you are. I'm in Melbourne in Australia at the moment, and I'd like to say it's sunny, but unfortunately it's very cloudy here, so we've had quite a lot of heavy rain, but hopefully it'll brighten up a little bit later. So fingers crossed. Okay. Right, well I think we'll kick off. A few people still not joined us, but I think we'll kick things off anyway as we're now on time. So what I wanted to do this morning for no more than half an hour really is to just run you through some tips and hints and things really on how to get the best out of BuzzSumo for content research and planning. So I'm going to focus on that element of content marketing today. So we won't do too much about influencer outreach or competitor tracking as such. We're going to focus very much on the content research side. So as I say before we start, there is a question box. Do just type any questions into the question box as we go, and I'll pick those up periodically as we run through things. So what I wanted to cover was content research, so how we can see what content's resonating, what trends are, what competitors are doing, who the popular authors are, and take you through that side of content research. That gives us a great deal of information about what's working and what's not working. But once we've got that, we then want to go through how do we generate content ideas. So how do we identify content opportunities from the information that we've gleaned, and how do we generate content ideas with that. And then the final bit I want to run through is then, how do we distribute and amplify that content? So what are the outreach opportunities? How do we see who's amplifying? How do we reach out to those individuals? And then finally just finishing up with some tips on how do we curate content and how do we set some content benchmarks, so in our planning we're quite clear what sort of targets that we're setting for ourselves. So that's what I aim to run through this morning, so hopefully that's what you're expecting. And I'm going to do most of it. I've got some slides, but I'm going to do most of it live on BuzzSumo, as I think that's a bit easier, really. So in terms of what content's trending, you probably do this already. You probably go to BuzzSumo, type in a topic, and you can see what content's the most shared, or you might be just typing in a keyword that you're trying to rank for, and that's fine if you know what you're looking for. You might want to just see what's trending more generally without restricting it to a topic, and I find there are a number of ways that work really well on BuzzSumo for this. So for example, you could say, right, who are the top 5 competitors in this space, and you could search for all 5 of their sites, or you could search the industry association sites, and I find that a really useful way of seeing what's trending in an industry. So I'll just jump into BuzzSumo and we can have a look here. I'll just put them on full screen for you. So what we're doing here, so I could just type in a topic. So I could type in a topic like e-learning, which is one that I would frequently use. And I could get the most shared content for e-learning. But what might be more interesting is to go to the industry association sites. And I've got a save search over here on the left. If you know BuzzSumo, you'll know that you can save a search at the top here. So I've got a save search which really searches the top 3 industry sites, so e-learning feeds, e-learning industry, Edutopia. And then this shows me the most shared content in the last year on their site. So I can then get a much better sense of what's trending in the industry by looking across industry association sites. And I'm just using the OR operator up here in the search. So I can search across 3 main industry sites, and I can see that there's stuff around gamification that might be interesting for me to look at, for example. And as always with BuzzSumo, I can refilter this, so I could refilter the content for the past month to see what's trending more recently or even the last day or so. So the first thing to do, say industry association sites, I find work really well to try and find content that's trending. I also like to search competitor sites. You can use the same type of search. I've got one set up here for SEO companies. And you can see I'm searching for 4 different SEO sites, and I can see the most shared content in the past week. I tend to use this search as a way of keeping up to speed with what's happening in the SEO industry, so I look at 4 of the big sites, but you could look at 4 of your main competitors and see what's trending in terms of their content. So you can see what's working for them, which networks it's being shared on, and you can resort in the normal ways. So if I don't know a particular topic, I find it's useful to do those types of searches. If I do know a topic, then I'll go through now how to find out a lot more information about that topic. So one of the topics that's interested me recently is around what they call MOOCs, which is massive online open courses. If I go back to the e-learning search, for example, the top sort of top posts around here are around MOOCs, for example. So, and even if I go to reorder by total shares, what I can see is that the 12 free most popular online courses for professionals are all about massive open online courses. So if I know that topic, I can simply see what's being shared, so I can search for that topic. And this will give me a sense of, what's being shared, what are the issues, what content is trending for that topic. But what I also like to do is actually see what are the most popular sites for MOOCs. And one way you can do this, and I think this has got a useful tip, is if I show you one that I prepared earlier. I did a top content search for MOOCs. In fact, I can do it live for you because that may be easier. So you go top content analysis, search for MOOCs here. So they're massive, it's an odd name, but massive open online courses. And you can see I get back all the analysis for MOOCs, so how many shares, where it's being shared, what day, what content length. But this is the one that I'm interested in here. So it's quite interesting because I wouldn't have expected for massive open online courses that the most shared domains are the BBC, Chronicle, LinkedIn, Forbes. I would have thought it's probably some of the education sites, but actually I can see that it's quite different sites. And now what I can do is then see, well, what content on MOOCs is trending on those sites. So I find this works really well. So if I now come back to my top content search, I know that LinkedIn.com is one of the most shared sites about MOOCs, which is a surprise. If I put in LinkedIn.com space MOOCs, this will return for me the most shared content about MOOCs on LinkedIn. So you can see I've now got all the articles from LinkedIn. And instantly, this tends to give me much better insight, I find, sometimes than just a general search. A general search on MOOCs is fine, but obviously if I can see here on LinkedIn, I'm getting things very specific to businesses in the case of LinkedIn. So how can MOOCs solve common training programs, essential business MOOCs, corporate MOOCs, how to get buy-in from employees. So I can get some very specific ideas around content and what's working, searching for very specific sites. The other nice thing about this is just you can find the authors who write about content. So another way of finding trending content is to find authors who are popular in an area and see what they're writing about. And so if I just take this top one as an example, so I've got how MOOCs can solve common training problems, so it's the most shared one on LinkedIn, and I can see the author here as Bryant Nielsen. So I can then have a look at Bryant's content and see is he a popular writer about MOOCs. So I can just click his name here within BuzzSumo, and this will bring back the most shared content for this particular author. So I can now see Bryant's most shared content. So I can see it's how MOOCs can solve training problems, another article about MOOCs, another article about MOOCs. So actually this particular individual is writing a lot about MOOCs and he's getting some most shared articles. So he could be a great person for me to approach as a popular author, maybe to interview if I'm writing an article about MOOCs, or certainly somebody who I might want to follow and to see whose content, to see what content he's publishing about MOOCs to give me insights. So really useful to dive in on a domain level, but then be able to see an author, and I find that works particularly well. And you don't have to restrict it, of course, to sites that came up as the most shared. I could go to a popular business site like ft.com and see have they covered anything about MOOCs. And actually I can see they have. So, you know, can MOOCs, which are free open courses, match an MBA? Some concerns about business schools, etc. MOOCs, learning becomes a joy again. So I can start to see, by using domain names and searches, a lot more information. So hopefully you can see how by searching industry sites, competitor sites, but going into a lot of more detail, and particularly using the content analysis report to see the most shared domains, that gives me some sort of interesting ideas there. The other thing you can do with the top content analysis report, I'll bring this up here. I've done a top content analysis report for e-learning, and again I get a lot of detailed data about e-learning and the average number of shares for a post. If I go down this time, so this just shows me the most shared domains for e-learning, but if I go down, we also show the average shares by topic, so I can see that actually in e-learning, as I would expect, things like schools, students will be quite strong, but MOOCs is the fourth most popular topic that's related to e-learning, so it probably just reinforces for me that I'm on the right track looking at articles about MOOCs. So I'll just come back to the slides, but that's just an introduction really to some of the things we need to look at. So I'll just make sure I've covered content in the slides. I will be uploading the slides to SlideShare so that you can get a full set of these. So searching industry sites as a recap, really useful. Looking at related topics is very useful within the content analysis reports. Obviously just do a simple topic search for MOOCs. Looking at industry sites plus a search, and particularly this is one I find particularly useful, is finding what sites are the most shared, because they may be outreach opportunities, but you can also then see the content being shared on these popular sites. And this is my LinkedIn resort, and then as I say, you can also click on an author's name, and here we picked up Bryant's content for popular authors. The next thing I want to focus on is just content is really time sensitive, so you get different trends in terms of what's working for different sites and competitors. So I just want to show you how on BuzzSumo you can start to get insights by using different time periods. And just to show you how much things change, I'll do a quick top content search. So let me run back to top content. I'll put you on full screen. If I search for a domain like socialmediatoday.com, and I'm sure they won't mind me sharing this, I can search for the most shared content over the last year. And this brings back to me their most shared content over the last year. And what's interesting is you can see over the last year, the most shared articles had 5,000 shares here on the right, 4,000 shares. If I look at their most shared content over the past 6 months, I now get results for the last 6 months, and what I can see here is their most shared content actually is only 2,000 shares, so that's down quite a lot from what it was over the year. So the last 6 months they're getting far less shares. And if I search for their most shared content over the last month, and I'll get the results back again here, you can see that actually the most shared article in the last month only got 577 shares. So you could argue, well, obviously the older a piece of content is, the more shares it gets. That's true, but only to a degree. Most shares take place within the first few days or weeks of a piece of content being published. So we can see that actually Social Media Today volume of shares is really going down, and I think personally this is related to a website redesign they did. And if I just bring up, I brought up an Alexa ranking for socialmediatoday.com, and you can see over the last 6 months it's declined quite markedly in terms of relative visitor traffic. But within BuzzSumo we can see how that's taking impact and shape by looking month by month at how their content's trending, so, and how many shares they're getting. It can be really useful to search by time periods here. I mean, you've got, for example, the ability to search by a specific range. So you can search for a very specific date range, and you can use this in a number of ways. So, for example, let's say we're preparing something on Thanksgiving, which is, I think, the last Thursday of the month in the US. I could specify a date range to see, okay, what was the most shared content last November. So I could look from, say, the 2nd of November last year. I could have a look back through to the end of November last year. So I can then hit filter to search for this date range. And what this brings back for me is the most shared content during the month of November last year. So in the run-up to Thanksgiving, what was really working, what was trending, because it may give me a lot of content ideas for my research this year for content that I want to write. So there's a HuffPost one, initially, if you shop on Thanksgiving, you're part of the problem. I quite like this last one being a Brit. BuzzFeed said it's Thanksgiving, so we asked Brits to label the United States. So you could do the same for Halloween, or I found it useful in the run-up to major conferences. If I'm preparing some marketing materials for a major conference, I find it really useful to search for that conference name in the month before it took place last year, or in the last 12 months, and then I can see what content was resonating and trending, and often that gives me ideas of what I might do this time. The other thing, of course, I can do here is I can see, oh, actually, the BuzzFeed are doing a lot of interesting stuff. I can actually see what was the most shared content on BuzzFeed.com for that period last year. So I can now refilter, and rather than searching for a topic, I'm looking at what were the most shared content. So this was most shared content on BuzzFeed this time last year. I can filter that down and say, okay, what was the most shared content about Thanksgiving on BuzzFeed this time last year? Because I might be interested in the way that they're pitching content, the sorts of headlines they're working. They're famous for being great at getting headlines that work. And so here we can see that there's 17 Thanksgiving turkey mistakes, gluten-free desserts, etc. Easiest Thanksgiving cooking hacks. So again, might give me ideas for content this year if I can see what worked for a big site like BuzzFeed or a competitor site over the last period of year, the same period last year. I'm just going to check if there are any questions from people we go through on this. Let's just see any questions. No questions. Do ask questions as we go if you have particular questions. But I do find the date range very useful for this. So to choose a particular period, say in the run-up to Halloween or Thanksgiving, find content that worked this time last year, as I say, for a topic or for a specific website, which is quite useful. You can also see how things change over time. So if I looked a year ago for massive open online courses, MOOCs, there was a lot about how it was going to revolutionize learning and change universities. If I search now for the past month, you can see that actually it's saying the real revolution isn't MOOCs. MOOCs will not transform education. Optimism about MOOCs fades in campuses, IT offices. And you can begin to see the differences quite clearly between what was being said a year ago as opposed to what's being said now. I did a classic one. I looked at London house prices a year ago. Everything's about house price increases. If you search now, it's all about possible house price decreases. So it's important to see what's trending now, not just to look at the last year, but to see what's trending at this particular point in time. So I find that really useful in terms of looking at real-time and time-sensitive searches. So I'll just jump back into the slides and recap that. So I say really useful, run a search, but do look at, say, last month, last 6 months, last year. You can also, if you really want to know what's trending now, another way of doing that is to do an instant 24-hour search. So, for example, I'll just jump in and do one for you. So if I wanted to search youtube.com and I wanted to see the most shared content on YouTube in the last 24 hours, I can simply hit filter. And now I can begin to see the most shared content on YouTube. So it looks as if there's FIFA 15 Ultimate Team. There's obviously a trailer been launched, so that got 37 shares yesterday. So if I want to see what's trending, even in real time, I could go to a big site and have a look at what's been most shared in the last 24 hours. So that could be another interesting use of the time-sensitive nature of the data. So do run searches over at least 3 time periods. As I say about time-sensitive searches, just showing you here how we've got a lot of people who are now cautious about MOOCs, for example, in the last month, unlike the last year. look at what was popular this time last year. So this is an example for Thanksgiving, but you can see what was popular for any time period last year, and you can do the same again for a particular site. So this was what was most popular about Thanksgiving on BuzzFeed this time last year. The other thing you can do, and this is really valuable, is you can export your findings. So on any search, I'll just show you live here. On any search, I'm just going to full screen mode for you here, you can see that you have an export button. So in BuzzSumo Pro, you can export up to 10,000 rows of data from your search. So you can see here that we actually, for YouTube, there's a lot of findings, 457. So we can export that data, and we get a lot more data than we can see on the screen here. And I find this incredibly useful for doing analysis. So if you export your findings, as I've done here for an article about MOOCs, you can very quickly skim down long lists of content. But you can also analyze it. So you could say, okay, if I looked at the top 50 articles, how many shares did I need to get into those top 50 articles? For example, I can slice and dice by Facebook, by Twitter, by the date actually published. So it's worth, if you're doing content research, exporting your findings from BuzzSumo and doing a lot more analysis. And so you can do a tremendous amount of detailed analysis if you export your findings. So that was the first stage of this webinar. I'm going to crunch through in the next 10 minutes. That helps you find what's trending, what's working. However, once you've even got that and you know that, how does that help you? So how does that help me then identify content opportunities? How do I generate content ideas off that? And I just want to walk you through some of the things that have been working for people that we've talked to and in our own experience. And I think the key, hopefully you'll have seen just by going through those searches, you instantly get ideas about what's not working in MOOCs, who's writing about it, etc. So I can see topics that are resonating. So I would say get your whiteboard, identify the topics that are resonating, so just start to write out those topics. I think the other thing that you can do, and this is, I think, very useful, is to take a popular topic and then create your own perspective on it, or even a contrary viewpoint. I was working with a company recently, and there was a very popular topic, and they just took a very contrary viewpoint. They didn't necessarily agree entirely with the contrary viewpoint, but they wanted to create debate around it, and that worked really well. It drove lots of traffic. So you can take a popular topic and then create your own perspective on it, or particularly a more controversial viewpoint around it. Other things you can do is take a popular topic and create a different format. So there may have been a really good article. There was one there on MOOCs on the 12 top business programs. I could do that as an infographic, as an example. I could take a content format that hadn't been shared yet and do it in that type of format, or I could create a video around it. Another good thing I think you can do is simply identify the writers of the 5 most popular posts and then interview them, or ask them if they will be interviewed, and you can either write to all 5 of them or you can interview one of them, but you can simply see who are the writers of the most popular posts, and that's good content for you to approach those and get their viewpoints. Also, when you go through, you can see this on the export as well as on BuzzSumo. You look at the headlines that are working. What type of headlines are working? Are they list posts, etc.? And get ideas around that. I also like to see related topics, so I often do a number of searches around related topics to see what might transfer to my particular area. So in education, I could search a number of different topics and see which ones might transfer to my area and add those to my whiteboard. I can do other things. I can see what my competitors are saying and maybe take a contrary position to my competitors. What's working for them? What could we do? I think the key, though, in terms of analyzing is also to look at where gaps may reside. What's not being covered? If you look through the trending content, what's not being covered? Or what was being covered this time last year but it's not really being talked about this year? So could we talk about that in terms of a trend or analysis of what's changing? So we can begin to see what topics are changing over time and explore why. Another simple way of creating content is simply to talk about the most shared posts. So, the top 5 most shared posts this week or in the last 24 hours on content marketing are X, Y, and Z. You can do a very simple analysis of, what's being shared, why is it being shared. It helps create new content all the time because every week you get new most shared content for any topic. The other thing I'd say when you're doing your content planning and research, you may have come up with, from your whiteboard, lots of ideas as to content that you might want to use. take that content and those ideas, do a BuzzSumo search just to make sure you're not covering the same ground, that someone's done a very similar post to you at the same time. So there are lots of ways you can be creative and create content ideas, and hopefully I've just covered a number of those for you today. Just conscious of time, so I'll try and keep you to 30 minutes to talk about distribution and outreach. So, okay, we've researched the content, we've got lots of content ideas, we're going to produce some good content, but distribution and outreach, what can we use BuzzSumo for to help us? The first thing you can do using a content analysis report is simply see what's working for a topic, what's working for a competitor by using a domain search, and you can see what's working for them. You can find influencers. The easiest way to do this is simply to do an influencer search. So if I go to BuzzSumo here, I take you full screen, I can go to influencers and I can search for MOOCs, and I can get a list of, I've gone to HubSpot by mistake. So I can search for MOOCs and I can get a list of the influencers that our algorithm has thrown up. As with all of the influencer searches, I can resort by number of followers, average number of retweets, those sorts of things. But I can look at these individuals and follow them, add them to a list, start to build a relationship, share their content, for example. I can even view the links they share to understand them a little bit better. Currently, as I said at the start of the webinar, I'm in Australia, so I'm actually in Melbourne. I don't know if there are any experts in Melbourne on MOOCs, but I could do a search and have a look to see if I could find any. And there are a number of people who've come up who are actually experts around MOOCs in Melbourne. So there may be people I want to connect with whilst I'm here in Melbourne. I could tweet them and meet up for coffee, etc. So that's one way, is to look at influencers. Another simple way is to see who's shared top content. So if I had any particular piece of content that I found here, so this is a well-shared piece of content, another way of building up a potential influencer list or amplification list is to simply view the sharers. So I can see who shared this content. I can export this list as we go. I can put it into a detailed spreadsheet and do a lot more analysis, import it into a CRM system, for example, or can build Twitter lists around them. Another useful thing that we're adding, and this is an exclusive here for you, is if you do a domain search, those of you who are pro users will get this in beta very shortly. Oops, it's got a big data. So if I search for BuzzSumo.com, so this is an exclusive, and you'll get this soon. You can see I'm seeing something here that you won't be seeing on your screens. So you'll be seeing a list of top content for BuzzSumo.com, but you'll also see a backlinks tab. And if I go to the backlinks tab, it takes a little while to run at the moment. This will bring back to me all the sites that link to BuzzSumo.com. I can filter them by a specific domain or an exact URL. I can look at multiple links from domain and whether I show multiple links or just one link or not. But what this will find me, and it does take about a minute to run the search, is all the sites that link to BuzzSumo.com, organized by the most shared content. So that's really useful because that might create outreach opportunities for me in terms of amplifying my content. I could see which sites are linking to, say, most popular content somewhere else or competitor content. So in the case of BuzzSumo, these are all sites that link to us. So again, I can export all of this data if I want to, but organized by numbers of shares. So I can see that actually, Social Media Examiner, 10,000 shares of their article that linked to us, a Buffer blog post linking to us, which had 9,000 shares. So you will shortly be able to, and this will be out in beta very shortly for those of you who are pro users, is see all the sites that link to a site, and they may provide really useful outreach opportunities for you to reach out to. Just quickly running through other parts. So finding influencers to amplify your content. Use the influencer search, then you can create lists, engage, interview them, etc. You can find the people who shared content, who's amplifying it, but you will also be able to see now who's linking to content, so that may be another useful way of approaching sites in terms of outreach. And do remember the content analysis report, you can see the most shared sites for a topic. So actually they may be outreach opportunities. So if I'm writing something on MOOCs, then maybe actually I should be sharing it on the LinkedIn Pulse platform, as there's getting a lot of shares there, or reach out to other sites. So do find popular sites. Finally, I'm just coming to the end of the 30 minutes, but in terms of setting benchmarks, so let's say we've now done the research, we've come up with lots of ideas, we've started to look at distribution, which networks we're going to distribute on, how we find influencers, amplifiers, potential outreach sites, potential sites to links. We can then set benchmarks for our content. So there are a range of things that you would set. In my view, you might look at the number of social shares, you'd obviously look at the sentiment, how many links that you get to that, the website traffic to your particular site or page, how many downloads or registrations you get. Let's say it's a white paper that there's registrations for. Obviously, the key ones are the number of qualified leads and lead conversions. They're really key. That's what we're doing a lot of our content marketing for. And BuzzSumo can help in a number of ways. So, for example, it's quite useful to set benchmarks. So I can see, I've taken a little bit here from the content analysis report for MOOCs. I can see that on average, an article got 120 average shares. So it starts to give me a benchmark that I can use in my own content. So you can set benchmarks. You can benchmark as to where you're at today before you do the content marketing, and then track the differences as you go forward. The final thing I just want to touch on is curating content. It's great to produce original content. We all know it's incredibly hard work to produce original, helpful, relevant content. And part of your strategy may well be curating content. And one of the best ways to curate content in BuzzSumo, in my experience, is to use the content alerts. And so just very quickly, a few tips around this. So you go to the content alerts top tab on BuzzSumo, and you can create different types of alerts. So you're probably aware of this, but I'll very quickly walk you through 4 types of alerts that you can create. A keyword or a brand alert. Every time we find content with that keyword or brand in it, we'll send you an alert, and we're very quick at picking that up. A link alert. So every time somebody links to a to a particular domain that you're tracking, say a competitor domain, you'll get an alert, and that may create opportunities for you to reach out for links as well. But also a domain alert, which is just if you type in a competitor's domain, we will alert you every time they publish new content. And so you don't need to go and track their site. You'll get an alert every time. And you can do the same for an author. So if we set up an alert for an author, every time that author publishes content, you get alerts. And I find this a really useful way of just keeping on top of what's trending and what's working, but also a way of curating content. So if I just show you my dashboard here, this is my BuzzSumo alert, and I can see every time we're mentioned. So you can see today, 2 hours ago, there was 5 tips mentioned us, 3 hours ago, expert bloggers panel, etc. So every time we go through here, we can see all the articles that link to us. What I find particularly useful is to keep tabs on those and to see what content is interesting and that I can curate. I like to curate things faster than other people, that I like to be first to know of these things. So I often set my minimum shares to 0. You can create a quality threshold by setting up 50 shares before you get alerted. I like to get it at 0 and make an assessment. The other thing I quite like to do with alerts is to create an RSS feed so that I can keep track of things. So if you click RSS up here, you can get an RSS feed for your alert, and then you can put that on a page or review it or put it into Feedly, for example. I use them in Flipboard myself, so I like to get my feeds organized and into Flipboard so I can review quite quickly. I'm quite sad I often sit in bed and go through Flipboard and see what was being shared about particular topics today. But importantly, you can also export this data. So you can export all your content alerts and then decide what you want to curate and what you want to share based on how that's trending. So alerts are a great way of curating content, as well as, of course, top content searches. A top content search, you can see what's trending in any particular period. And again, I tend to find time-sensitive searches work well. What was the most shared in e-learning in the last 24 hours or the last week? And then I can write content around that. So just a little bit conscious of time about curating content. So that's all I want to run through for. I'm going to now just check question panel and see particular questions that have come through, and I can pick up and answer them. So you're all easily satisfied because I have no questions in the question panel. I hope it's been useful. I say I'm Steve Rayson. My email is just steve@buzzsumo.com. If you have any questions at all, just mail me. Really happy to try and help. If you want to share tips, that would be great as well. We like to share those and put them on the site. Or you can tweet to myself, obviously to all of the guys here and team here at BuzzSumo. But we're really keen to help. So I hope that's been a useful overview about using BuzzSumo for content research, generating ideas and looking at distribution, amplification ideas. As I say, thank you very much for attending, and if you have any questions at any time, do just feel free to mail us. For those of you who are currently pro users, you will get that backlinks functionality in the next week or so, and it would be great to get your feedback on that. We'll be launching it in beta, so you can then see backlink data. The other thing I can reveal today is that we're also going to be launching 2 new filters, a language filter, so you can filter content by language for most shared content, and also a domain filter, so you can filter by .co.uk or .de or .fr for France, so you can narrow your most shared searches down significantly. So the languages filter, the domain filter, and backlinks are all coming very shortly, and should provide much more detailed tools for you to use to focus in on what's working in your area. So thank you again very much for attending, and say any questions, do just give us a shout. Thank you very much.